It is once again time for Fridays in the Field, brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. We're out near Omaha, Nebraska, and today we're at Vala's Pumpkin Patch and Apple Orchard, and Vaugn is joining us. He is the agriculture manager out here. A lot of our listeners and viewers have probably heard of Vala's Pumpkin Patch and Apple Orchard, but this is a large property that you have the opportunity to manage the ag division of it of sorts. So tell us what all is happening here when it comes to agriculture.
Oh, there's so much happening here as far as agriculture goes. We have traditional agriculture as part of our pumpkin rotation. We grow pumpkins, corn, and soybeans on a 3-year rotation. And then we have, of course, the pumpkins themselves. We have approximately 45 acres of pumpkins this year. We have the apple orchard itself that, depending on what you count, there's 35 to 40 acres of apples here, all high-density trellis trees. And then we have the landscape aspect, which falls within the ag manager realm of things. We have this year we're actually planting about 36,000 plugs throughout the landscape in beds and pots and whatnot. Then we also do corn maze, about a 5-acre corn maze, and we have you pick flowers. We have about a 2.5-acre zinnia patch, and we have about 2.5 acres of sunflowers also. So there's just tons of stuff always happening here at Vala's.
Well, typically when we talk to producers here on this program, and their end destination is an elevator or a co-op where they're ultimately putting their grain, but here you're serving a different audience in the form of agritourism. This is agritourism on steroids, probably the biggest agritourism spot in the state of Nebraska, right?
Oh, absolutely. I probably state of Nebraska, and probably I'd say at least a 200-mile radius.
Yep. Talk about who your clients are, though, and when they start showing up to the farm.
You know, our client, it's amazing. When you pull through the parking lot, you see, Nebraska, Douglas and Sarpy County and Lincoln, but you also see Kansas, Missouri, South Dakota, Illinois, all over the United States. Actually, people come from all over just to visit Vala's. So it's a nationally known entity.
When do you guys officially open?
Officially open will be Labor Day weekend.
Okay. And so talk about your season there, when people are visiting the farm. How long does that stretch?
Sure. So we'll open for Labor Day weekend. That will start with our Apple Festival, focusing on the Honeycrisp and early bearing varieties. And then from that weekend through the end of October. November 1st, we sleep in a little and start cleanup.
And getting ready for the next year, I'm sure.
Ready for the next year immediately.
Yep. We're standing in the apple orchard right now. Let's talk about that crop. What's it like to grow apples in Nebraska?
Bryce, you've known me for a long time, and there's a lot of apple growing history in the state of Nebraska. And, a lot of people don't realize that apples and fruit crops were one of the primary crops in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and this is just a extension of that. It's bringing agriculture to the masses, essentially, and that's what Vala's is all about, is creating a family experience through agriculture with an emphasis on agriculture. And growing apples is, there's not that many apple growers in the state of Nebraska, although more than you might realize, not the acreage that we have here, but there's several smaller growers that have 5, 10, 15 acres that they're growing. But it's a unique growing opportunity in the state of Nebraska.
And you've planted more apple trees this year, correct?
Yes, we plant more apple trees every year. This year was kind of a down year. We planted about 3,000 trees.
That's a down year, 3,000 trees.
That's a down year, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of trees there. And so when do they actually start producing? What year number is that?
We plant dwarf trees. They're grafted trees on a known rootstock, a dwarf rootstock. Rootstocks are kind of interesting in that you can get all sorts of characteristics from your Zion wood. But what we're looking for is the dwarfism. So we'll plant those, and one of the characteristics of a dwarf tree is precocious bearing, which means they will bear fruit very, very young. And so the trees that we planted this year are probably 1 to 2 year old trees in the nursery. We'll actually have to pop flower blossoms off this year to keep them from bearing. So we try to keep them fruitless for 3 years, possibly 4, depending on how much they develop, and then year 3 or 4 we start taking a crop off. And that crop, you know, we're looking at a half bushel to 3/4 of a bushel per tree at that point.
Let's talk about the pumpkins too.
Sure.
When do you plant pumpkins?
Plant pumpkins June 1st, ready or not. Actually, we started the last day of May this year, and then we finished, let's see, on Friday. So Friday was the 2nd or 3rd. So we got 50 acres of pumpkins in those 3 days. So it's always a kind of a tension-filled time, and we got a nice timely rain right after that. Not as much as I would have liked to seen, but we got them in the ground in a rain, so now we just sit back and wait.
How do you seed pumpkins?
You know, I use a monosome vacuum planter, modern technique. It's a 2-row planter using vacuum, picks up the seeds, and very, very precision depending on the type of pumpkin. We shoot for somewhere around 34 to 36 inches, a little tighter than what you might think on the larger type of pumpkins, and down to 24, 26 inches for some of the smaller varieties.
So you mentioned you did have a little bit of rain.
Yep.
Any particular things you're fighting this time of year besides just trying to make sure you get those timely rains?
Oh, all sorts of stuff. Weeds.
Yep.
Fighting weeds, you know, rain's a mixed blessing. With rain comes weeds. Disease, of course, with the moisture, especially in the apples. We're on a very, very tight spray program, so we're looking at disease. And really right now, as far as the apple and the orchard goes, we're treating for codling moth essentially, but some insects also.
A lot of things happen out here, and I'm excited to be able to introduce our viewers and listeners to that over the course of this year's growing season. Vaugn, appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. We're
going to catch up with you here 6-7 weeks from now. Big picture, what are some of the things you're going to be worried about between now and then?
Well, again, the disease, what we need to do is make sure and ensure we have a perfect apple for our guests to pick. You know, people do not like blemish fruit, and so that is any kind of bug sting, any kind of blemish. So we'll be spraying shading compound to keep them from sunburning. So just really at this point, as far as the apples go, keeping that fruit beautiful and keeping the trees healthy. And then as far as the pumpkins, you know, it'll be fighting the weeds at this point in time, and we don't spray too much on the pumpkins because really we're looking at pollinators in the pumpkin field coming up really, really soon, and we're really cognizant of pollinators both in the orchard and in the pumpkin fields.
A lot of things to watch. We'll look forward to catching up with you, like I said, here in 6 to 7 weeks. That is Vaugn Hammond. He is the agriculture manager out here at Vala's Pumpkin Patch and Apple Orchard. We'll see you next time right here on Fridays in the Field. It's brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank.